Hey, what's up guys? Drew here over at RevHiker Outdoors. Now I know I've been doing a lot of knife videos lately, and if you watched a couple of my last ones, I did the Contigo, I talked about the Benchmade 940-1, and then I talked about a mod that I did to my Benchmade Triage, and I'll try to go ahead and put some links to those videos in this one. Now, one of the things that I try to do on my channel is do viewer requests. So people that watch the channel that have questions, I try to do videos that people want me to do. So if you guys have a request, I don't get to all of them, and some of them I just can't, and I wish I could do them all. But this one I figured I could, and if you have been watching the channel, I kind of mentioned that I had knee surgery. And so I'm laid up, and when I'm laid up and all I can do is really just basically sit down, you can bet that some of my knives are going to get a sharpening in between my Bible reading and book reading and calling people, that I'm going to get some knives sharpened as I do that. So one of my requests was this, to show how I sharpen my knives, because on Instagram I have a lot of my knives on there, and I kind of do some demonstrations of how sharp they are and stuff, and people ask me, how do you do that? So that is the question I want to answer. I'm going to show you guys the equipment I use, and then I'm going to sharpen a knife for you so you can see what I do. So stay tuned, and I'm going to show you how to get an awesome edge on your knife. Okay guys, so here we are. I've got a selection of knives on here, and before I show you exactly how the Lansky works and how I use it, I want to talk a little bit about edge angle, because a lot of what we perceive as sharpness has to do with the geometry on your edge. This is an example. This is a straight razor. This is an example of something with an incredibly low angle. You can see just how thin that is. There's almost nothing to it. And that's because these have to be incredibly sharp and an incredibly fine edge, and they're not going to take really any abuse. Cutting hair is not hard use on a knife. Now, if you're using a knife for camping, or you're going to be maybe doing a little chopping, or if you really are a hard use guy, you're going to want to consider for lack of a better term, a more blunt angle. I think this is a good demonstration here. This is a good illustration. This is something like a fine edge, okay? And I'm not going to get into the different kind of grinds with hollow grinds and all that, so just for intensive purposes, this is your blade stock, this is your bevel. This is your blade stock, this is your bevel. A longer bevel like this, which is a smaller angle, is going to give you a sharper blade, more or less, in terms of how we perceive it, and it's going to slice better, it's going to cut better. However, it's less stable. It's more prone to break and to chip and things like that. A more blunt angle, which is something you might find on like these big chopping knives and things like that, will hold up better under high stress, like chopping and more hard use stuff. And then what I use is something kind of in between those two. I don't use a really fine edge, and I don't use a blunt edge either. I use 20 degrees on my Lansky, which might be something like that. You know what I mean? It's kind of somewhere in the middle between those. So anyway, this is going to determine a lot of your sharpness. Okay. For me, for EDC tasks, I use 20 degrees, like I kind of mentioned. I think it's a really good blend between having really good sharpness and slicing, and still holding up and not being super delicate. There are some exceptions to that. This is one of them. I use this at 17 degrees, and again, it's not a huge difference, but from 20 degrees to 17 degrees, this bevel widens considerably. Now, this is one of my hunting knives. This is a Lone Wolf Mountain Skinner, and you can see that's a pretty wide bevel, and boy, is this knife ever sharp. It's nuts what you can get with that 17. However, I wouldn't use this for some harder things because it is so thin behind the edge. Now, some people really like low angles, and they would say that this is thick, that's blunt. But for me, if it can shave and it can slice paper, I mean shave easily, That's good enough for me. And 20 degrees, which is what are on all my Benchmades and every pocket knife I own, is good enough for me. So anyway, I know this isn't super in-depth about edge angles, and we could talk a lot about it, but we don't have time. Maybe another video, but good rule of thumb for me, for EDC stuff, 20 degrees on the Lansky is going to do you just fine, and you can get it stupid sharp, and it'll still hold up and not be prone to rolling or chipping nearly as much. So good balance of kind of toughness and sharpness. So anyway, I'm going to clean some of this stuff out of the way, and then I'm going to sharpen up my recently modified to a Tonto tip, a reverse Tonto tip, triage. So stick around. Alright guys, so here we go. For the Lansky system, you just want to open up your knife, and first thing is first is clamp this bad boy in. Now, there are a couple different options with the Lansky, and there's a stand you can get, but this is just your basic 5-stone system. And let me get this clamped in, and then I'll show you some things. So I just kind of finger tighten this first screw here, and then I'm going to crank down on this rear one. I got to be off camera, excuse me. Alright, so I get that nice and tight until this gap is pretty much even, and that's going to ensure just a good grip on this thing. Now, one thing you want to do is when you're sharpening a knife, I usually take the end of this and get something I can point with. I take the edge of this and I try to line it up with the flat portion, with that grind. So I can see it's a little, I gotta just wiggle it back a hair. Okay, so now it's pretty much lined up, and if you do that every time you sharpen it, you're going to have the most consistent, and it's going to take the least amount of work. So both sides, yeah, that's lined up. In the back here, I try to get this pretty close to the back of this. If you have room on the knife, I try to go all the way back to this, but on this blade, I'm just going to keep it lined up with the flats. If you don't have flats, then it's better to keep this lined up here. And that'll just, again, ensure consistency. You want to get this about as tight as you can get it with your fingers. The tighter it is, the better off you're going to be. So that's that. That's how it's going to look. And then now let's get started with the stones. You know, I'm going to change this camera angle so you get a better look at this. Okay guys, so I understand this is a bit of a wonky angle, but I wanted you to get a good bird's eye view of this so you can see it. So we got this all clamped in, and now what I do, there's a couple different ways you can do this, but what I generally do is I'll start out with a rougher stone. And in the Lansky, you've got, this is a 120, this is a 70, then you've got a 280, a 600, and a 1000. With this, because it's already pretty sharp, I'm not going to start out with these really low ones. I'm going to go right to a 280, and I will we'll see how close we are in the angle, and that's where the Sharpie comes in. So I just take the Sharpie, draw along both sides, and then you'll be easily able to tell with just a couple passes where you're hitting and if you're going to need to reprofile this. Now from the factory, you're pretty much going to have to reprofile them all. You're probably going to end up starting low and working your way to where you want it to be. But I'm going to test this with the 280. And I generally hold the knife so that there's not as much stress on this. But anyway, put it in the 20 position on the guide rod, and then just take a couple passes. Make sure you go the whole length. Okay, so now when I look at that, I'm hitting the whole edge until I get right about at the tip. So the last maybe ½ inch or so, I'm going to need to take more passes towards the point here, and that's pretty much what you're going to do on all of them because it's a little steeper. Now let's try the other side. Again, in the 20 position, few passes, And again, actually this side looks pretty nice. I'm not going to have to really do anything here on this side. So anyway, what I'm going to do now is, as I take this video, I'll probably put it I'll speed it up most likely. Either that or I just won't tape the whole thing. But I'll tell you my technique first. I do an equal number of passes on each side. And with this, because there's not a whole lot to do, I'm going to start at like, say 10, and I'll go like 10, 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I skip a couple here and there. And that'll give me nice, and then I'll move up to the next stone and do the same thing. And then on the 1,000 it's a little bit different, but anyway, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of the technique. Again, you put it in the 20, and I'll just start. And so on and so forth until you get down to 1. I'm going to break the camera, finish up with this grit, and then I'll get you when we get back to when we move up to the next grit, which is 600. Alright guys, so for whatever reason, sometimes when you're doing YouTube videos, you get caught up in making the video and you forget little things. So before anyone starts freaking out at me, let me say that the honing solution should be applied to the stone before starting. Now Lansky says that you can do this dry and then put the honing solution on and then rub it in, and that'll bring all the particles to the top, and you can see it makes like this little slurry. But I prefer to just put it on the stone before I start. So anyway, side note, I forgot to do that. Anyway, let's I'll just do a couple passes so you guys can see. Now, one thing that you really need to make sure of is to take your time, because you don't want to pop off the front of this or go too far this way and have the stone slip off like this, because then you come down and you're going to hit that edge and you're going to take a chip out and ruin a lot of your work. So just take it nice and easy. It's not a race. Just make sure you're getting the whole blade all the way back, all the way to the tip. Okay. Then you go to the other side. Alright, so on and so forth. So just make sure you do, if you do 8 on this side, you're going to do 8 on this side, and then work your way down 10, however many passes you want to take. Now if you are reprofiling, there's nothing wrong with taking the coarser stone and just scrubbing on a certain spot that needs to get worn down until it meets the edge. A lot of times when I'm reprofiling, I'll just work on one side until I knock it all down nice and even and I reach the edge of the bevel, and I raise up a little burr. You'll feel a burr on the other side. Then I switch to the other side and profile it all the way down. So sometimes, you can break the rule of equal strokes when you're reprofiling, but when you want that finished edge, then you go. So anyway, I'm going to take a break, and actually, you're basically just going to do the exact same thing until you get down to the 1,000. So I'm going to go ahead and sharpen this thing. Then when I work my way up to the 1,000 grit, I'm going to come back and show you some different things that I do. So, okay guys, so as you work this blade, you're going to notice a couple things. One, you're going to notice all this black stuff kind of work its way onto the blade, and that's what they call a slurry. And all that is tiny, tiny metal filings mixed in with the honing solution. And so you get varying amounts, and every so often I just take these things have been around the block, but this is just an old paper towel, and I'll just take and carefully wipe the blade down, and then you can inspect your bevel for any deep scratches or any nicks. And one way to find out if you're kind of on the right track and you're doing the right thing is take your finger and just run it like this across the blade. No. Just kidding, guys. What you can do though is kind of take your finger like this and take your fingernail very carefully, okay, very carefully, and run it like this. And if you feel any snags, any rough spots, anything other than very, very smooth, then you know that you've got a little problem area and that you need to continue on that same grit until that thing is gone. Now if it's a chip or something, you might have to go back to a rougher grit, a lower grit, and work that until the chip or the roll or the whatever is gone. But you can take the back of your fingernail and please very carefully find any rough spots. Now this seems very smooth, not very smooth yet, but smooth enough for me to finish with my 600 grit. So what I do when I'm finished with these stones, and I left these dirty so I could show you, is I just take the honing solution, just a couple little dots like that, so nothing big, and just rub them in. Okay, and that lifts all the particulate, all the little pieces of the blade. That lifts them up out of the way, and then you take here and you just wipe them. Now I can't even tell you how many times I've sharpened knives on these, so even my best efforts to keep these clean, you can see that the stone, you know, while the natural color is more like that, these are getting somewhat dark. And when you do enough, you'll start to get uneven waves in here, and you can see a little, well, it's hard to pick up, but right here. So eventually you have to get a piece of glass and straighten these out, and I have yet to do that on mine, but it is coming up soon. And again, I'm going to get that out of the way so I don't actually cut myself. Just usually a drop or two is enough, and you just get this nice and kind of work that up with your finger. Take one of your old nasty rags, and it lifts most of the particulate up out of there, and then you're good to go again. Now, all the other grits, you can really definitely feel a bite as you're doing it. You can feel the grittiness. Once you move up to the 1000, this thing, you know, you rub it and you're like, how could that ever take anything off of a knife? How could that ever sharpen it? But I'm telling you, it does. It doesn't take a lot of material, but it polishes it and really refines what you have on there. So with this, because there's so little bite, it takes a little bit more. So initially, when I first go to the 1000 grit, I'll put in the 20 as always, and I'll just kind of, I'll work it just back and forth like this. I'll show you. And I'll slowly work down to the back and back out to the front, and then I'll do that whole thing again. I'll slowly work back here. Oh, okay. I just hosed myself, and I'm almost glad that I did it. When you slip off like that, the edge of your stone hits the blade. Now, what you need to do every time you do that, yep, see, I can feel a rough spot right there. Now I need to go back to the 600 and knock that thing down. Hopefully the 600 will do it. But that's why you should take your time. And again, for the sake of video, I'm trying to get this done, but I'm going to go polish that all out, and then I'll come back and I'll finish up the 1000, okay? But it's almost good that that happened for illustration purposes. So stick around, and I'll finish up with the 1000 in a second. Okay, so I went ahead and finished. I knocked that down with the 600. Now it's nice and smooth again, and I'm just going to finish up with the 1000. So like I said, I take a bunch of small passes and I work that back and forth 2 times. Then I do that on this side 2 times, and then I go back and I'll do this again 1 time, back and forth, and then I'll go to my passes, and I'll do, with a 1000 grit, I'll do 20 and 20, and then 15, 15, and then 10, 10, 9, 9, 8, 8, blah, 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 until I get down to 1, and then I go on to my homemade strop. So I'm just going to do a couple passes again so you guys can see how it's done, and then I'll move on to the strop. Okay, so I pretty much am finished up with the 1000 grit, and got a decently shiny edge on there. And now it's time to move on to the strop. And this is one of the most important parts because you can get a really good edge with the Lansky, and I'm not saying anything that you can't, but the strop is what is really going to make the difference between a very sharp knife and a stupid sharp knife. And I like my stuff to be stupid sharp. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and say that I got the sharpest knives on YouTube, because I know there's some guys that, you know, have a $700 sharpening system that obviously can, you know, get better results than this. But for how much I've spent in this, which you can get the Lansky, this 5-stone for like $40-ish, and some scraps of leather and a cedar shingle I had laying around for a strop, I think my results are pretty impressive. So anyway, let's get on to the stropping. Very important about stropping. A lot of guys, when they strop, they want to go like this. Here, I'll show it from this angle. They want to strop and then lift their blade like this. All that's going to do is roll this and increase your angle and ruin it. So the way that you're supposed to strop, and I'll try to do this at this angle so you can see, is you make a pass very low, then you roll it on the spine and make another pass, then roll it, pass. So this is the correct way to strop. Now, because I don't have any compound or anything like that in this, I do it slightly different, and it's just to get results faster. So I'm going to show you the way I do it. I still keep that low angle, and I make a pass, and then I roll onto the spine and I come back, and I'll do like 20 of these aside, then I'll do 15 aside, and then I'll work my way down from 10 to 1, and then I'll do like singles for a little while too. And it really depends on how, you know, what level you want your blade, but for the sake of just showing the video, I'll just count down from 5 down to 1, and then I'll finish the strop afterwards. But anyway, just to show you, this is kind of what it looks like. Okay, so again, normally I would do a lot more, but just to show you the purpose of this, you can see it begins to polish that edge, and you get a nice kind of reflective edge on there, and I'm hoping that this shows up on camera, but it will get very nice, and the more the work on the strap, the better it'll be, but it will shave quite readily. You can see those hairs just pop, they jump right up off. So that's where I want my blades to be. So I hope this helped, guys. I know several of you guys, and Country Fried Pride was one of the guys that requested this on Instagram, but that's how I do my stuff. Thanks for watching, guys, and don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe if you enjoyed this. God bless you, and I will catch you next time.